It has just dawned on me that of the episodes I've reviewed so far, I gave half of them a 2 out of 10, and 2 others I was mixed about. So to say I've got low expectations is one thing, but if you've been watching these reviews so far, you'll know my enthusiasm is at an all-time low too. So when an episode like KaBlam comes along and quote-unquote impresses me, I genuinely start evaluating my own critical faculties to see if it's all working up there. Then I watched the episode for a second time, Microsoft Word at the ready, and, well, you're just gonna have to keep watching. Michael, it's KaBlam, not KaBlim, not KaBoom. KaBlam. So, the story is thrown into our laps without any dawdling, which I very much liked, as the Doctor receives a package from the KaBlam man. The pacing of this episode was a vast improvement from the past few episodes. It was a nice change from the slow, dialogue-heavy wastes of time we've had to endure over the past few weeks. The Doctor's childlike excitement for the delivery was very good, allowing the audience to identify with her from the offset. I thought the story in general posed quite an interesting dilemma. Most of us literally have no idea how a product on our screen gets to our front door. This was definitely one of those episodes that acts on a contemporary issue. With reports of warehouse horror stories gaining momentum online at the moment, it's understandable how these questions and concerns have landed in the public consciousness. And boy, does the writer of this episode capitalize on that. However, this episode doesn't exactly act like an expose of Amazon itself, but the people who operate within it. Automation also plays a big role in the themes of this story, doing a much better job of tackling the issue than the Tsaranga conundrum did. God damn it, I knew I'd have to say that stupid phrase again. The Doctor opens her parcel and it's a fez.
Still me?
Why would you ask your friend such a stupid question? Is it any surprise that only Graham responds with,
"Nice"?
and then they all move on to the next subject? Pure awkward. The characters land on the moon of Kandoka, where we see 2 shots that established where they were that looked really fake in my opinion. It may have been down to the fact we don't see their feet, so my immediate assumption is that they've been green screened. The strangest thing is though that we do see them walking in the landscape, so maybe it was a reshoot, I don't know. It just threw me off as soon as they landed, but keep this all in mind because we will be returning to this issue of CGI visuals later on. The Doctor once again acts all shifty when they get inside. How did this woman Judy not see this happening in her periphery? More to the point, when did the gang establish they needed to act like employees in order to solve the Help Me mystery? In fairness to the writer though, it would have been well boring of an episode if the Doctor just handed the letter over to Judy and said, "I got this in the post, can I have a reason why?" And Judy would have been all like, "Nah, sorry, it's all automated, innit?" Not gonna lie though, I loved the little tour they all got afterwards. There are these great methodical, almost Wes Anderson camera movements. The most expansive and very tiny details of the company are shown to us. There's also some awesome music this week, and it plays throughout the episode. It evolved and alternated in ways that, as a musician, I find very appealing. Not once did I think they were reusing a theme. In fact, the whole suite sounded as though it was building up to something big, and boy did it succeed in doing that. There's something suave, stylish and polished about this story, and the combination of these creative elements really emphasize these characteristics too. Another creative aspect was the appearance of the robots, as it literally did all the talking. Ryan's totally right when he says they are really creepy. I just thought it was a shame how easy they were to defeat, and their domineering presence definitely wore off after a while. If we're assuming that the robots are essentially in control of this planet, why would they design them so cheap? Oh, I get it. Okay, this episode is more intelligent than I thought. Of course they'd be made cheaply by a company that is based off of Amazon, paying their workers a shitty wage right at the bottom when the richest man in the world owns the company. Nice one. Yeah, I see what you did there, but hold on to your hats, children. We are literally about to jump down a rabbit hole of catastrophic depth. So, strap in, because things are about to get funky. KaBlam has the same story as the Postman Pat movie, and no, I am not joking. If any of you have had the misfortune of seeing it, you'll know that Postman Pat's enemy is also automation, as a giant corporation takes over the post office. Literally, an army of robot postmen are built, ready to send out to kill. The moment I saw this shot here, I remember thinking, I've seen this somewhere before, but couldn't put my finger on it. And now writing this script, it dawned on me.
Horror
Some notable changes were that the Doctor didn't sing on The X Factor, and I don't think anybody died in the Postman Pat movie. Oh yeah, and David Tennant wasn't in this episode, who, for those of you that don't know, plays this guy in the movie. It would have been even cooler if a previous regeneration of the Doctor had written "Help Me" and we had a male and female Doctor episode. I think I would have just given the episode a 10 out of 10 then and there if that was the case. But it's just old Matt Smith's Fez instead. If this isn't a subtle way of kissing Stephen Moffat's ass, I don't know what is. There was also a comment about the giant wasp and Agatha Christie, which was a bit weird and ultimately boiled down to, yep, more ass kissing. I don't know about you guys, but this week's episode felt a bit like a, dare I say, more traditional episode of Doctor Who. By the way, when I use the word traditional to describe Doctor Who, it is exclusively in reference to the reboot of the show and does not reflect my opinions of classic Doctor Who, as my knowledge on that is very limited. In fact, because so many of you ask about it, I'm just going to reel off the classic stories which I've watched in their entirety. An Unearthly Child, The Daleks, The 10th Planet, Frontier in Space, The Sontaran Experiment, Genesis of the Daleks, The Keeper of Traken, Logopolis, Castrovalva, The Visitation, Earthshock, The Five Doctors, Caves of Androzani, The Mark of the Rani, Timelash, Survival, and that awful icky movie with Paul McGann. Ugh. Alongside it feeling like a back to basics episode, I thought it was really humorous too. I quite enjoyed watching our protagonists doing these monotonous jobs, and the Doctor getting upset at not being allowed to ride the conveyor belts was thoroughly amusing too. Her character seems to be a bit of a big kid from what we got in this episode, which is fine by me. Suits her better than being an ultra-serious wannabe hero type, but then again, the big kid mixed with that description I just gave is basically every incarnation of the Doctor since 2006. Some other comedic honourable mentions go to the following: Graham when he gets landed with the mop, Lee Mack explaining the company's CRM policy, and Kira's adorably haunting comments about work giving people purpose. She is not only crossed off the list of people who could have sent the help me card, but also drives sympathy towards the character. I thought Lee Mack's character, well, it was more like a cameo if you ask me, was great. His character fitted right into the story, and most of his jokes felt like they came from the character he was playing and not just Lee Mack. I'm glad there wasn't too much of him like when Lee Evans was in that 2009 special. One of the other characters I've yet to mention was Gilbert Huff from The Incredibles showing up in this episode. He tries to assert his authority and gets quite the verbal backhand from Jodie. Obviously it's a bit corny and unnecessary, especially as we've only just met him, but it was cool how she transformed her lecture into a question relating back to the help me delivery slip instead of just hating on the powerful white male in charge like she normally does. Then they go on a leisure break, and I loved that this garden looked aesthetically creepy during those brief sections of the episode. The overly saturated colours combined with shots like this one emphasise the ever watchful eye of the robots by having almost half the screen engulfed by one. The Doctor then decides she wants to be honest with her management, pulling out the reason they were there all along and telling off Gilbert Huff again for being irresponsible. This bugged me only because this character is just a brick wall. He doesn't have any ego or drive and just comes off as a bit of a bully. Remember Henry Van Statten?
What a guy.
Don't ask me why, but for some reason I really loved that line that Jodie says, laters, and then immediately regrets it afterwards.
Sticky went by.
Now we've reached the halfway mark and things start getting a bit, ridiculous. I've become a bit confused with some of the world-building aspects of this story. Do the people who work there live there? This would make sense, seeing as all the management are up during the night time. The other thing I was left wondering was, if 90% of Kandoka are unemployed, how the hell are they paying for all these lavish gifts? Well, you guys know what's coming next, don't you, right? Look, I wasn't expecting a Toy Story 2 kind of scenario, but I wasn't expecting the droid factory from Attack of the Clones either. This bit was so cheap, and so obviously cheap too, that I was just sat there thinking, they were doing so well. All of the action is so rigid and lacks the fluidity to make this sequence exciting in any way. Take for instance when Ryan celebrates that he was able to fall down a slide. He high-fives this other character, Charlie, knocking him off the conveyor belt. Things get a bit strange though because he falls for a solid 5 seconds. I know it doesn't sound like much, but just a bit of basic physics can tell you that he would not have survived that fall. Here's a clip of a man falling for 5 seconds. Do you think he survived that? All this sequence needed was a quick cut to Charlie falling on the belt below them, so it would at least make coherent sense. The best bit though is when the companions drop themselves a few moments later, it only takes a total of 2 seconds for them to drop. So if you, like I, thought this section was a bit rough on the old noggin, this is why. Also, the shots of the pair standing up to jump down look fake as fuck. The computer generated backdrops are not only too heavily detailed for the eyes to focus on anything, and the blurry post effect too on the backdrops doesn't help one bit either. But I think ultimately what my qualm with this section boils down to is that it wasn't even necessary. Ryan's insecurities drove this action sequence into the ground too, as it took him so long just to jump off the conveyor belt. Isn't it a miracle that neither belts went off in different directions during that time? Then things got a bit more positive on the doctor's end. It was nice that the little robot gave us a good visual indication of how they were interacting with the system. I did also like that the little finger touch of death thing came into play in this moment so the doctor could disarm Slade. I thought that thing was going to remain dead and buried with episode 2, but apparently it has some utility after all. It was also quite nice watching the build up to the reveal that it was the bubble wrap that killed people, whilst playing to the episode's strengths by killing the most sweet and innocent character off as the first one we see firsthand instead of vanishing off screen. Sadly, the runner was tripped up before the finish line though, because the doctor literally explains everything we just saw with Kira again, just in case we weren't paying attention to the fact she popped bubble wrap and died. I also thought it was a shame they didn't make more of a thing about the missing workers being turned into goop. None of the people were retching at the thought of innocent people being turned into black goo, which I myself thought was quite horrifying, but they all just shrug it off because there's an army of robots waiting to greet them down the corridor. How do you guys know this isn't just where they go to recharge or something? Charlie's dialogue about going from 10% to 5% to 1% was performed passionately, but when he's confronted about what he's about to do, it gets cringy as hell. How this little baby was able to get past the entire system for so long completely confounds me. I also didn't clock onto why the system needed the help of an outsider to fix their internal problem. Why didn't it just communicate with the 2 members of management and let them know that they have a saboteur amongst their staff? It amazed me too that this one individual was so into the idea of getting more people employed, and the way to do that is, kill the potential workforce. Great plan, idiot. The subject of pay is basically left unmentioned in this episode, which is a shame because it could have given the story that extra level of detail that would make it a bit more relatable for the audience. The cherry on the cake though, he says he's sorry. Aww. Despite all these issues running through my head, the significance of the episode's title was finally made apparent to me, which was super sweet. It was really nice that it wasn't just the name of the company, but KaBlam was how the whole thing ended too. This is an overstatement though, because if all those simultaneous explosions took place at the foundations of this building, why the hell didn't the whole building just cave in on itself? Oh yeah, budget. Then the team head off after another long, hard and stressful day on the job where Yaz suggests returning Lee Mac's necklace to his daughter. I was honestly thinking, no! And thankfully it didn't come to that. However, afterwards, Graham gets close to popping the bubble wrap and both Ryan and the doctor say basically the same thing to him. And that's it. That's the end of the episode. The temptation to pop bubble wrap affects us all, apparently. So, did it suck? I don't know. There were some awesome parts that were refreshing for the most part, but there are fundamental problems that plague this episode too. I loved the characters, the narrative, the robots, the music. There's a great combination of creative elements and themes to be found in this episode. It was funny and had dramatic twists and turns throughout, but it's also an uninspired story with plenty of bootlicking from an obvious Doctor Who fan that induces cringe into my veins. Alongside the ups and downs in visual quality too, I have mixed feelings about this one, but fortunately there are slightly more positive aspects of this episode than negative, so I'm gonna give KaBlam a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Weirdly enough, I never pop my bubble wrap, it normally just ends up in the bin. What do you guys do with your bubble wrap? Leave a comment below or join us for a chinwag on the Discord server. Link is in the description.
Yeah, get me a billy cock done now. Bye-bye.